What's going on YouTube? So today we're going to look at the two best ways that I have found to fill pocket holes on the cheap. So a couple weeks ago I had done a video about the new Kreg jig that I got. This is the K4 and I love this thing. I've already built a couple benches and all that fun stuff, and it actually worked out very well. This is like my new favorite tool, and if you haven't seen the video, check it out. But that being said, once you actually drill the holes and join the two pieces of wood together, you know, you're left with a couple pocket holes that you need to fill, and that's where, well, these come in. And I gotta be honest with you, they work pretty good, but they're expensive. So even though these might only be about $4 or $5 a box, you go through them pretty quickly. You know, I know when I built this bench, even though it wasn't a very large bench, I went through about $1.50. So you figure you keep buying boxes and boxes, they start adding up, $5 at a time. You know, every project that you do, trust me, they go through very quickly. So I went on YouTube to find a couple ways of making the pocket hole plugs, and there was two that I found that I really liked. That being said, I think, and I'm not sure, we're actually going to try making those here. I think each one has its own drawback. So we're going to try looking at the two drawbacks. So this is a review of the ways to make pocket holes, and like I said, there's two different ways. So let's take a look at the manufacturer, the way they make their plugs. So it's smooth up on top, so we got to look at that. Over here, there's a little bit of a slant, but I'm not too much worried about this. So basically what that does is it slides down into the hole that you drilled. Sometimes though, I will admit, even though this goes in pretty good, once you start, you know, attaching these, sometimes these holes get really tight. Or if you don't drill them out just right, they get pretty tight. So that being said, if you put one in here and it's too tight and it breaks or whatever, you gotta throw it away, and that's just a wasted plug. So you get 50 in one of these boxes here. I got a dowel, and I'm going to try to make two different jigs. We're gonna try two different dowels and see how many we actually get out of two dowels. So here are my two dowels. 98 cents a piece. These are 3/8. You can go to Home Depot, Lowe's. I bought these at Home Depot or whatever, but they sell these now. You can get these in oak, you can get these in other types of wood, but I'm not really worried about that because most of the stuff I'm making is out of a 2x4 anyway. So I'm just getting the cheapest dowels I can find, and we're going to try making some plugs. So the first method we're going to try here, they actually make the plugs like you would find store-bought. So it actually should come out looking pretty close to this. So what we're gonna have to do is we're actually gonna have to use a 3/8 drill bit and drill out a hole just to be able to insert our dowel in. What you're gonna need for the first method here is the smaller Kreg jig or the repair jig, whatever you wanna call it. You're going to need a clamp, and then you're going to need a bandsaw, and I'll show you all that when we do the bandsaw. Then you're going to need a drill, and I am using the Kreg's 3/8 drill bit with this. So that's what you're going to need for this method here. So you're going to need a little bit more power tool to do it this way than the next method we're going to show you. But let's see how it works out. So the first thing I need to do is grab my scrap piece of 2x4. You can use really whatever you want, but I need to hook up my smaller jig onto this 2x4. So now that I got that flush, what I need to do is actually clamp it down to the 2x4 so it doesn't go anywhere. So this is where, once again, your clamp is going to come in. All right, so you can see now that I am flush with the 2x4 and the jig. So because I am drilling into a 2x4 or 1x3, 1.5 by 3.5, whatever you want to call it, it's not an actual 2x4, but I set my depth on the bit using the Kreg jig at 1.5 inches. So that's the depth that you want. So let's drill a hole out and see what we got. So just so you know, I put that in a second time just because I want that smooth. I don't want any rough edges, and I want it wide enough that that dowel is going to go in and I don't have to fight it. Okay, so all I did now was remove my clamp, and you can see here that I have my pocket hole and a little hole here at the bottom where that pilot end piece went through. So you're going to have this because you're going to need something to push the plug out, the one that you just made. You're going to have to get in there somehow, so you're going to need a hole at the end. It doesn't have to be a specific size, you just need it large enough that you can get something in there and push it out, and then when you put the actual dowel in, it doesn't go all the way through. Alright, so now my next step is I have to make a notch, right? Because when you're cutting these on the bandsaw, you're going to end up with a piece that's sharp, and you're not going to be able to keep putting them in. So you're going to have another area to do a cutout. So I'm going to mark this 1.5 inches right here. And from there, that is where I'm going to cut out my notch. So 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to use a chisel on that. All right, so I got my chisel. We don't need to cut it real deep. We just need something that is going to keep that dowel in place. It doesn't need to be perfect either. All right, so let me chisel the rest of that out, and I will be right back. All right, so is this perfect? No, but guess what? I don't need it to be. So once again, here is your store-bought right here, and you can see that fits into that slot right there. So we just need something so that doesn't move around, and we need something that uses a backrest so it doesn't go in too far. Okay, so let me pull this camera back for you here, and I'm going to show you now what we're going to do. So now the dowels are pretty long. If you don't have a lot of room to work, you can cut these in half, break them, or whatever you need to do. But once again, this is a 3/8 dowel, and we are going to insert this end piece where it's smooth, right, into this area here. So let me zoom in here a little bit for you. And now you can see how this goes, right? 3/8 dowel fits perfectly inside the pre-drilled pocket hole that we made with the Kreg jig. Okay, so that's your first step. So what we want to do is actually take this over to the bandsaw, and we're going to start cutting. We're going to cut this right off, and remember that hole is going to come into play here. But we're going to cut this off, and we're going to pop that out, and you should have a perfect plug. Okay, so here comes the fun part. Actually using the bandsaw. So what you want to do is get this right here, and you're actually going to start cutting these out. Okay, so you want to make sure that your fence is lined up, but you don't want it extremely tight where you're going to catch this 2x4. All right, so that looks about right. So I'm going to actually lock my fence. And these don't have to be perfect. I mean, they're going to be sanded anyway. So if they are a little bit bigger than what you need, that's fine. Like I said, you're gonna cut these down anyway, sand them, paint over them, whatever you're gonna do. So don't be too concerned about this being a little bit too big, but this should be fine. So let's actually make a cut, and we'll see how this works out. All right, so here we go. We're gonna turn it on and make our first cut. Okay, so you can see now this is pretty flush with the 2x4. So that's the plug right there. That's what this would look like once you put one of those store-bought plugs in there. Okay, that's what you're trying to do, trying to hide that hole. So let's pop this out and see how that works. So now we have this cut here, and we can't use this again. Not this way anyway. So this is why we cut that notch out. We want to make sure that this piece right here stops that. It's going to be a backrest like we talked about. And now you're going to cut it this way. So let's turn this on. Okay. Now the problem with this is that you're probably going to have some burr. So you might want to take some sandpaper to each one of these. It's probably going to make it a little tight, but we're going to see here. Let me adjust my light. It's not too bad. So then there is your other plug. So once again, I'm just going to pop this out. You won't have to do this every time. Oop. And then all you're going to do is go back to the first method. You're just going to put it in like that. And then we're going to pop it out like so. And that's it. So you can sand these down a little bit just with a little piece of sandpaper, maybe some 120. But right there, I already have 1, 2, 3, 4 plugs. They're not the prettiest thing in the world, but man, they're going to work. They're going to work good. Like I said, just take a little bit of sandpaper. Actually, let me do that right now. So all I have is an old piece of sandpaper here. So let me a little bit more. Let's do on that. Probably not that easy to do with the disc. So there you go. I mean, that's it for that step. Now, that being said, once again, let me put this in here again for you. I mean, it fits well, does a good job, and you can sand that down, you won't even see it. The thing about it is that you're gonna need a bandsaw or something that can cut that down. You can probably use a handsaw, I'm guessing, but that's method 1. That being said, it's a little bit time consuming. You need some power tools. Sometimes these right here are tight. You know, I just happen to maybe get a really good dowel, but it worked out very well. So that's the first method of creating your own pocket hole plugs. All right, so let's look at the second method. And even though the first method worked fairly well, I'm excited to try this new method here. You can see the plugs once again. This is the homemade, and this is the smooth, polished factory plug. But guess what? This one's a lot cheaper, and it works just as well. Is it as smooth? No, but I don't care, because guess what? Like I said, we're going to sand it anyway. So what are you going to need for the second method? Well, you're not going to need the bandsaw, but what you're going to need, and this is a DeWalt version of the Japanese push saw, and this cost me about $13, and I've never used one of these before, so I'm going to do this for the first time with you to see how it works. You're just going to need another piece of scrap 2x4. Once again, you're going to use your 3/8 bit, but you don't have to worry about how far you're going in with it this time. Okay, we're just going to drill straight down through, and all I want is something that I'm going to be able to fit that dowel in through there with. Now, I never had to adjust my bit to begin with. It was 1.5 anyway, so that should be fine. But what I want to do is just come straight over here, and I'm not going to use the jig this time. I just need a place to drill my hole, and here we go. All right, does that need to be perfect? No. That's what's nice about this project. You don't need to be perfect. I'm good at not being perfect. So now that we got that hole drilled, we should be able to put our dowel in and go straight through. And that works pretty nice. You can go a little bit bigger than 3/8 if you want. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but as long as you can get that in there and it's pretty snug, you're gonna be all right. All right, so now what we wanna do is actually measure 1.5 inches. That's our magic number, right? 1.5 inches on the actual end of this 2x4, and it doesn't really matter where. So we're gonna mark 1.5 inches right there, okay? So then what we're gonna do, let me just try to straighten that. I can use my square actually, but I'm gonna drive a cut right down to the middle of this. So let me get that set up and I'll be right back. Okay, so now, and you have to excuse this, I accidentally set my fence up wrong on my bandsaw, and you can use the actual DeWalt to cut it, but since I had the bandsaw, I just used the bandsaw, but my fence was set up to my other cut and I didn't adjust it, so don't mind this mark right here. But basically what I want to do now is take my dowel and slide it through the hole that we created and we're going to go flush with this right here. So you can see it slides in, bring that flush right there. So now I am going to take my push saw, my DeWalt push saw, and I'm going to cut that right there. Okay, so now what I want to do is take my dowel and I'm going to slide it in here. Remember, nice and flush. And I'm going to take my Japanese push saw, and all I'm going to do is cut. That's it. And now I'm going to push this out, and you don't have the actual nice smooth cut. You have basically a dowel. Okay, so let's cut a couple more of those. Okay, that's it. And you can put like a little pan or something under there, and a couple more. Just so you know, the DeWalt saw is very sharp. All right, so now we have 3 dowels, and you're wondering, well, how's that going to work in the pocket hole? So let me remove this here. Take this dowel out, slide that over here, and I am going to get a piece of 2x4 that already has a pocket hole cut out, and we're going to try and plug it. All right, so now I got my dowels. I gotta be honest with you, they work a little bit better when they're longer. So there you go there. Put that one right there. So you can do the 1.5 inch. I find that 2 inches probably works better. I've just been messing around a little bit here. The 1.5 inch will work fine, but I sort of like mine a little bit longer just because it allows you to get these up underneath, the saw up underneath a little bit better. So let's go ahead and try to cut this and see how this works out. Oops. All right, let me see if I can zoom in there again. All right, here we go. I'm gonna move my clamp back a little bit. Yep, I don't know if I'm liking this. See if I can clamp this down a little bit better. See if I can zoom this down here. I gotta be honest with you, not really caring for this way. Okay, so you can see this was cut down a little bit over here, but you still got a little bit of a lump. This one here cut pretty smooth, so you can go and sand those down. And yeah, I mean, I guess it would work. It cut out the wood a little bit. Now that being said, this is a $13 saw. Some of the other videos, I believe they were using, I don't know, their saws were like $30, $40. But that being said, I mean, it worked. You know, I found out that maybe the dowels needed to be a little bit longer, but all in all, I mean, it did what it was supposed to do. Okay, so what we did was we took this one out here. These are the ones that we just cut flush, which, you know, I don't know. I mean, I guess it worked all right. It is flush, I'll tell you that. And I'm going to put in the plug that we made in the first video. And we'll see a side-by-side comparison. This one goes in pretty good. Okay. And you can see this one sticks up a little bit more, which is fine because you can sand that anyway. And I'm actually going to do that right now, and we'll see what they look like side by side. Now, mind you, I didn't put any glue in these, but I just want to see what these look like sanded down. All right, here we go. So let me zoom in here so you can see. On the plug that we inserted as a dowel and then chopped down, it's actually very, very smooth. This one here, I mean, it can still use some sanding. That's fine. I think it actually worked out pretty well. I think they both actually worked out pretty well, to tell you the truth. So I'm happy with both of them. The first method, you're going to need a bandsaw or hand saw would work, but you're probably going to need a little bit more power tool knowledge, I guess. The second one is pretty simple, it's pretty basic, and all you need is a $13 saw from DeWalt. And once again, I just got this, and it's okay. It's not bad. I guess it is what it is. But long story short, if you were to do either one of these methods, I think the first method, you can take these plugs with you. You don't have to worry about lugging this around, but you might not get as flush of a cut, which is fine. I think it did a great job anyway. And once again, you don't have to carry this around with you. Who wants to carry that around with you? You can carry a pocket full of these and you're fine. The other method is probably a little bit cheaper to do, probably a little bit easier to do, a little bit basic, more basic than what you would the first method. But all in all, they're both going to save you money. I mean, that's all you need right there is the dowel. You just hammer it in. Once again, you know, I would probably go with, I don't know, I'm going to go with the first method. I like the first method better. I just think it's easier. But that's because I have a bandsaw. But I hope this helps you. I hope you save some money on these plugs, because I know they can start adding up. And once again, not too bad. So I appreciate the videos that I watched, you know, showing me how to do this. And, you know, between the two, once again, I'm going with the first method. Okay, if this helps you, you know, please subscribe, thumbs up. Catch you later.